Some preachers are what I call naturally. It's a story about a couple that had been married for about 20 years and hadn't been a particularly rewarding marriage, especially for the wife. And so she finally started urging her husband to go to marriage counseling. And he didn't see any reason why that they would go to marriage counseling. He thought things were going pretty well. And he said, if you've got a problem, why don't you go? But I don't have one. And it's a pretty typical husband. So anyway, but she finally persuaded him that they needed to go. And so they got to the counselor's office, and he said to the husband, he said, have you got anything you want to talk about? And he said, no, not really. So he said to the wife, he said, Helen, do you have anything you want to talk about? And for the next 4 hours, she just poured out all of the neglect, all of the things that he had done, the insensibility. Never tells me how nice I look. He never tells me that I cooked a great meal. He never pays any attention to me, and she just poured her heart out. And after about 3 or 4 hours of that, the counselor got up from behind his desk and he walked around and he got down on his knees right in front of her. And he looked up at her and he said, Helen, you are the most beautiful, the most sensitive, the most charming, the most intelligent, the most endearing. You're the most warm and compassionate woman I have ever met, and I praise God every day that He brought you into my life. And he started standing up, and he took her by the hands, and he stood her up, and he embraced her warmly and held on to her, and then he tilted her head back and he kissed her. Well, the husband, he's watching this, and he said, wow, he said, that was really something. And he sat Helen back down. He walked over and he said, Henry, that is what Helen needs from you 3 times a week. Do you think you can do that? Well, he said, I don't know. He said, I can drop her off here on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He said, I fish on Fridays, though. Well, if I say anything humorous after this, it's an accident. I'm not intending to. I just wanted to say how I hope you notice how different the speakers are. And we're so different. And yet, it seems to come out well. What I've been listening to Forey, but I listened to him a long time ago as well, and listened to Jim. And what I appreciate about them, that I appreciate, is that they're not 3-point preachers. I just have this thing about 3-point preachers because, anybody that believes that people are going to remember 3 points is really arrogant. Getting them to remember 1 is a real task. And, Jim is a 23-point preacher. I'm sort of a 1-point preacher. I was going to say that 4 is a no-point preacher, but I don't mean it that way. But he left an impression on me. You understand that? He left an impression on me. I walked away with an impression. And I think there's something really precious about that. Hebrews 11 records the names of people whose faith was severely tested by being called upon to endure incredible life-threatening trials. Names like Abel and Enoch, Noah, Abraham. But I want you to listen to what, in contrast with that, he says in Hebrews 12:1. I know you're familiar with the verse, therefore, always watch the therefores. That means I just said something really important. And what I want to say to you now is based on that. Therefore, since he now turns to his present audience, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. Do you ever feel that way? No, see, he says we. He says these people are surrounding us. We're surrounded by these people. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely. And let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us. There are forces around us, and I've heard that referred to during this lectureship. There are forces that surround us that are calling us to quit. There are things inside of us. You know, I stopped reading the newspaper 4 or 5 years ago. It's not the news, it's the bad news. I mean, they got hundreds of people hired to scour the world looking for bad things to report to us. Donna Tessman has just lost a son. Kathy Randall has just lost a husband. We all know people who are battling with cancer. I got a text just a few moments ago. John, we've got to go back to Vanderbilt. Things are not going well. People have lost their jobs. People whose homes have been foreclosed on. We have major political, economic issues that threaten not just our economy, but who we are as a nation. In addition to all of that, we're witnessing some things that are worse than that. Living together is rapidly becoming more predominant than marriage. Of the last several couples that I have counseled with, pornography it's epidemic. It's epidemic because it's so easy. And you know what they keep saying to me? They say, I'm not doing anything wrong. No, isn't that interesting? No, without exception. Without exception. I'm not doing anything wrong. Drug and alcohol abuse is epidemic. Rape, murder, sexually transmitted diseases, divorce, pornography. Sometimes, even going to the assembly of the congregation can be discouraging. No, it's the truth. Sometimes we lack passion. We lack conviction. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, Paul says to the Christians at Corinth, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners compete, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win it. Athletes exercise control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we do it to receive an imperishable one." Are you exercising control in all things? I think it's an important question. Are you exercising control in all things? We admire people who discipline themselves in order to be able to perform in all kinds of areas. Are we disciplining ourselves in spirituality so that we can perform in the most important areas of all? Being a devout person, being spiritual, doesn't fall out of the sky. It's a result of disciplining ourselves. Last Sunday, I was speaking in a congregation near Jacksonville, Florida, and I saw about a half a dozen young people sitting about 3 rows back, and they were all playing on their telephones. I mean, does that bother you? And I think, where are their parents? What parent is allowing a kid to bring his telephone to the assembly? What's wrong with us? The thing that disturbs me most about the gadgets that we are so fascinated with is that they tend to destroy our desire to live abundantly. When a father and son spend more time playing on gadgets than playing one-on-one in the driveway, there's something wrong there. At Christmas time, I was sitting in the living room with my son and his wife, their 3 teenage boys, my daughter and her husband, and their 2 less than teenage boys. And I looked around the room, and I was the only one. No, we're sitting in the living room. I was the only one that wasn't playing on his phone. I just, okay. Abundant living is the result of doing life, not watching it. No, I'm saying something important to you. You cannot live a life that's abundant when you're watching it all the time. You're supposed to be doing it. God meant for us to live passionately. He meant for us to enjoy life, not watch somebody else do it. Virtual reality is not reality. No, just think about it for a moment. No, you can take, virtual reality is not reality by definition. It's a game. It's a game. One of the hardest things to come to grips with about God and about Christianity is that foundationally, it isn't about what happens to us on this earth. I do not say that God is not concerned about our struggles and our heartaches. I do say that Christianity is about reality. And this earth is passing away. No, ultimately, it's not real. heaven and hell are the only realities. No, do you get that? Heaven and hell are the only realities that there are. In John chapter 12, verse 23, Jesus is in the last 2 weeks of his life. And he says this to the disciples: "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Whoever serves me must follow me." And listen to this. "Now," he says, "my heart is troubled." I appreciate so much that he said that. You don't know how comforting it is to me to know that Jesus had a troubled heart. And if you've never had a troubled heart, I don't think you've got a heart. But no, there's something really important here. He says, I am troubled. And what shall I say? Shall I say, "Father, save me from this hour"? No. It was for this very reason that I have come to this hour. Father, glorify your name. I want to be like that. In my hours of my deepest troubles, in my hours of my deepest struggles, in my hours of loneliness and affliction, I don't want to ask God to remove that from me. I want God to accomplish the purpose for which I am in that situation. Nothing comes to us that God is not in, church. Nothing comes to us. And there is a coming of God to us in every circumstance. There is a coming of God to us. Our problem is we focus on the circumstances rather than focusing on what God is trying to do in those circumstances. And so God's purposes go unfulfilled. Don't you get that? If I'm focusing on the circumstances, God's purposes cannot be fulfilled. The thoughts of what he's about to go through, the trial, the crucifixion, ring from the lips of the Christ, "Now my heart is troubled." And the question he asks himself is, how shall I react to my circumstances? Shall I ask God to change my circumstances? No. That is not the purpose for which these circumstances have arisen. I am in these circumstances so that God can be glorified. When we begin to believe that all of the circumstances of our lives are for the glory of God, whether negative or positive, we will begin to take a different attitude toward our circumstances. We will start seeing every circumstance as an opportunity, something to be exploited for the kingdom of God. We will see them as obstacles to be overcome so that we can demonstrate the power of a cross-centered life. There is no time in our lives when our testimony for the power of God at work in us when we are struggling. They'll say, don't you see that when you're happy, anybody can do it? When you're standing beside the bedside of your dying wife, see, it gets a lot harder. But that's the greatest opportunity we have. If our faith is no good to us there, it's no good to us. Hebrews 11 talks about that great cloud of witnesses that surrounds all of those who are running the great race. And that means that as we run, we are surrounded by people like Abraham and Moses. No, we still are. No, that's what the Hebrew writer, Abraham's been dead a long time when the Hebrew writer writes this. But he says, no, you're surrounded by Abraham and Moses and David and Elijah. We have John the Baptist and Peter and Paul. And David wrote, as the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people. Isn't that wonderful? But I'm also surrounded by my parents. I'm surrounded by Judy, by my niece Priscilla, by Susan Edgen and J.D. Fairley and Gayleen Caswell and Norman Gibson and Prentice Metter. And one day, for some others, my name will be added to that list. And those of you who are still running, I'll surround you. That means something to me. Perhaps the greatest value of assemblies of this kind is the strength that we draw from running together. And when you're tired, when you get discouraged, when you think about not coming to places like this, you need to think about those who will be discouraged because you aren't there. Back about, I guess it was maybe 1988, I was preaching at Vandalia. May have been earlier than that. But anyway, I have a really good friend that lives in Dallas. And he called me and he said that the Texas Regional Cross-Country Races were going to be held at May Simmons Park. And he had a very, very talented daughter who was going to be running, and he said some things had come up, he couldn't come. But he wondered if I would pick up his wife from the airport and see to it that she got out to watch the race. And so on a really bright, clear, beautiful Saturday morning, I found myself at May Simmons Park watching the Texas Regional Cross-Country Races. And I saw something there I've never forgotten. No, it was a precious thing, a beautiful thing, a thing that was worth telling about. The races, there were schools from 1A all the way up to 6A. And there were boys races, girls races. Now, cross country is about a 2.5 mile race. And it's just over hills and rough terrain. There's no track, so to speak. And so at times the runners are a half a mile away. Well, on this Saturday morning, there were thousands of people that had gathered on the hillside of May Simmons Park. They'd driven hundreds of miles to just watch one race. And as they watched those kids run, and the race ended where it started, but at times they were way, way far away. This is so good. And so I didn't have a kid running. So I watched the people who did. And you could watch them. There's 80 to 120 kids in every race. I mean, it's a herd. And these parents are standing here, and they're looking out, and they're only interested in one runner. And you can hear them talking to each other. They say, "Oh, where is he? Oh, there he is. There he is. I can see him." And they're so excited. And then you'd hear them say, "Run, Jimmy." Even when they knew they couldn't be heard. No, they would say it out loud. I'd listen to them. They'd say, "Run, Jimmy. Run, Scott. Run, Susan." As the Class 6A race came to a close. Now you got to see, here they come, and they're coming down right down in front of us. I watched a 40-plus-year-old mother carrying a purse, wearing a skirt, and high-heeled shoes, run beside her daughter. There were hundreds of people crowding in, screaming, but this mother was determined to be heard. And so as she runs, awkwardly stumbling, her long dark hair coming out, streaming behind her, she was heedless of the spectacle that she was making. She said, "Run, Tammy, run!" Now, you have to understand, her daughter was in trouble. She was in the last stages of exhaustion, just before collapse. Her breath was coming in ragged gasps. Her stride was broken. And here was her mother saying, "Run, Tammy, run, run, Tammy, run." And she wasn't urging her daughter to win. She was urging her to finish. "Run, Tammy." And I watched this. When that girl heard her mother's voice, a change came over her. She straightened up. She found her bearing. She found her rhythm. And she crossed the finish line. And she turned and collapsed into the arms of her mother. And they fell down on the grass right there. And they were laughing and they were crying and they were having the best time in the world. And when I drove away from May Simmons Park, I thought, God, I appreciate that so much. Thank you for letting me see that. And I thought about my children. And I thought about a race that my children are running. A more important race. A much more important race. A race that demands just as much training. A race that demands just as much discipline. And I have coached them. And I have pleaded and I have begged and I have punished and I have praised and I have cried. But now the gun is up. And their race has begun. And I am a spectator. I am a spectator. And I watch them as they go through their life, and I see them stumble. I see their breath come in ragged gasps. And I say, "Run, children. Run, run." And I'm not urging them to run faster. I just want them to finish. I just want them to finish. And that last 100 yards, I want so badly to be there, but I may be gone. I may have to watch the end from another arena. But I hope and pray that they'll know that they are surrounded by their Father. And that I am calling their names and saying, "Run, Lincoln. Run, Brendan. Run, Kristen." My challenge to you this morning is to make a conscious decision to finish what you've started. Walter Payton, some of you are old enough to remember Walter Payton. I was telling somebody the other day, I was talking to a large group of college kids not very long ago, and I said something about Muhammad Ali, and I saw them turn and look at each other and say, "Is that the name of some Arab country?" Or I mean, how can a person not know who Muhammad Ali is? So I said, "You never heard float like a butterfly and sting like a bee?" He said, "What?" So the point was lost, but anyway. Walter Payton, this is a remarkable thing, is one of the privileged few people who have been inducted into the National Football League Hall of Fame. If you never played the game, you really can't appreciate this. In his professional football career, Walter Payton gained over 9 miles. If you don't play you can't understand what an incredible feat that is. He gained over 9 miles. He averaged 4.6 yards every time that he carried the ball. What that means is this. For every 4.6 yards of that 9 miles, some 350-pound gorilla knocked him down and sat on him. No. Walter Payton got knocked down 3,358 times. No, it's a staggering thing. Walter Payton got knocked down 3,358 times. I know you're going. He's not in the NFL Football Hall of Fame because he got knocked down 3,358 times. He's there because he got up 3,558 times. Everybody gets knocked down. It's a part of life. But not everybody gets up. Some prefer to stay down so that they can whine and complain about how bad their lives are. Not only must we finish, we need to finish well. Several years ago at the Red River Family Camp, my wife Judy and I were listening to Jim McGuigan. And Jim said something about the need for Christians to die well and to die bravely. And Judy never forgot that. She never forgot that. And during those last months of her life, 2 or 3 times every week, Judy would say, "John, am I dying well? Am I dying well? Am I dying bravely?" She said, "If I die whining and complaining, if I die whimpering, it will be a denial of everything I have ever said that I believe. And it will be a denial of everything I taught my children. I want to die well. I want to die bravely. I don't want to leave this world kicking and screaming as though this was the worst thing that could happen to me." In 1939, the tiny island country of Great Britain stood virtually alone against the Axis powers. After several months of relentless bombing by the German Air Force, London had been reduced to rubble. And Adolf Hitler sent a message to Winston Churchill telling him that England must either surrender or be beaten into submission and annihilated. Churchill's response is not only graphic, it's worth remembering. "We will fight in the air. We will fight on the beaches. We will fight in the streets and the alleys. We will fight on our feet. We will fight on our knees. But let all of those who would enslave the English people know that we will never surrender. We will never surrender. We will never give up. We will never give up. And let them know that every inch of English soil they occupy will be purchased with their blood. And if England falls, there will not be one Englishman left alive to take prisoner. Satan is pounding the cities of our lives relentlessly. And he is calling upon us to surrender or to be annihilated. Let every Christian here today, every brother and sister of mine, send a clear, consistent message to the prince of the power of darkness. Let us tell Satan that we will fight for the things we believe. We will fight for the church. We will fight for the Word of God, and we will fight for the truth. We will fight at our jobs. We will fight in our homes. We will fight on our feet. We will fight on our knees. We will fight when everybody tells us to surrender. Let us tell Satan that we will never give up. We will never give up. And if the hosts of hell should take everything from us, we will take our stand at the feet of the cross. We will cover ourselves with the blood of the Lamb of God, and we will render Satan powerless to do anything in our lives. The Christian life is not a dash. It isn't those who run the fastest who win. It's those who finish. And that is why the Apostle Paul says at the last, I have fought a good fight. I have kept the faith. I have finished. And if you've heard anything I've said to you today, you'll understand why the last words of the Christ are, it is finished. I've done what I came here to do. I've done what I came here to do. I really want that to be my epitaph. That I did what God has called me to do. I have finished. I have finished. I have finished. And that will be the best moment of my life. I have finished. Our God is a covenant God. We are a covenant people. And I want to make a covenant with all of you today. This is my covenant with you. I promise you that no matter what happens, no matter what challenges Satan throws at me, no matter what disappointments, no matter the loneliness, no matter what afflictions arise, no matter what discouragements come, no matter how many miles separate us, that I will run with you. I will run with you all the way to the end. I would like to ask you, all of those who will covenant with me, all of you who will make that covenant with me and with God, I'd ask you to stand up. I'm asking you to promise God, I'm asking you to promise each other that you will keep getting up until God calls you home. Keep getting up. This is my message to you. I have a single point. Keep getting up and finish. And I promise you, no matter where you are, no matter what trials come your way, if you can remember me, you will know that I am running with you. And when we cross that great eternal finish line, we will collapse into each other's arms, and we will laugh and cry and rejoice together in the great salvation of God. Come we that love the Lord, and let our joys be known. Join in a song with sweet accord. Join in a song with sweet accord. And thus surround the throne, and thus surround the throne. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Brothers and sisters, finish and die well and die bravely. May God bless you.
Be seated for just a moment, please.